Today on Mother Mayhem.
Your picker has never been broken. You just didn't give yourselves permission to use it. You've used your mothers. You've used your friends. You've worried about being judgmental. You worried that he was a nice guy. You worried. Hi, welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Podcast for daughters. I'm your host, Heather Gray, and today's conversation is one that I have been wanting to have with all of you for quite a while. It's a conversation about learning to have healthy adult relationships after experiencing narcissistic abuse as a child. In fact, I tried to start having this conversation with all of you back in episode 4 together. That was the one that I called Navigating Relationships After Narcissistic Abuse. If you haven't listened to that one yet, or if it's been a while since you have, it might be helpful for you to go back to that, and I'll for sure link that one in the show notes for you. I think that episode is going to be a really nice complement to the information that I want to share with all of you today. Many of you know this from your own lives and your own personal experiences, but one of the hardest parts of healing from narcissistic abuse is this part of learning how to have a healthy relationship afterwards. You're only used to relationships that feel chaotic, where you have to fight for love, acquiesce endlessly, and people please incessantly in order to have a relationship. Breaking all of that conscious and unconscious hardwiring can be really intimidating and overwhelming. And oftentimes what ends up happening is you all get trapped into these relationship cycles where your heart ends up being broken several times. You might find yourself like today's listener. She wonders if maybe her picker is just permanently broken and if she's only ever going to feel safe with herself. Spoiler alert here on this one, her picker is definitely not permanently broken, and she can feel safer with more than just herself. And I'm really looking forward to showing her how. So first, I have to introduce you to Brenda. You're going to hear her story, and then I'm going to share my thoughts about all of it on the other side. And for inquiring minds, I chose Brenda from The Closer, a character that was played by Kira Sedgwick a handful of years ago. She was perfectly imperfect, tenacious. She got shit done, and she also had a really tender heart. Here's Brenda's story. Until I got married, I actually grew up thinking that I had the most perfect mother, because that's what she always told me she was. I realize now that that wasn't the case at all, but it was part of the Kool-Aid that she had been serving me my entire life. And boy, was I thirsty. My mother, who I believe came by her narcissistic traits honestly as a result of her family's toxic dynamics and her own unprocessed issues of self-worth, absolutely raised me to be an extension of herself. I was a thing she owned, often reminded by the phrase, "But I'm your mother," as if to justify her entitlement to everything about me. Her firstborn child and only daughter, I learned very early that I was brought into this world with a job, and that job was to make her look perfect to everyone, primarily to herself. As my therapist has helped me define my own experiences, I now know that what I lived through was chronic gaslighting, control, manipulation, and classic cycles of love bombing, devaluation, and discard phases. As an adult, I've suffered through some financial abuse, public humiliation, and a really painful dismissal and erasure by her of the loss of my first son, who was stillborn 17 years ago, on her birthday, which is the only thing that's actually allowed that day. The resulting impact is that I'm a grown woman with difficulty asserting appropriate boundaries with others because I was never allowed to define them for myself. My mother told me what my boundaries were, and she was always allowed to break them. She believed she was entitled to me like I was an object, with no right to personal agency or autonomy. I had no rights to thoughts, ideas, opinions, or behaviors that didn't align with what a good daughter was supposed to be. I'm hypervigilant of others' emotional states because my mother's feelings were a result of the extent to which I pleased her or obeyed her. I learned that the only needs that matter are the needs of others, and to voice my own hurt feelings meant I was ungrateful, spoiled, spiteful, and hateful. The phrase, "I never thought I'd have such an ungrateful daughter," was delivered to me since the age of 7 or 8. Shit, guys. I'm so sorry you all hurt so much. I'm so sorry. Okay. All right. Back to it. And for context, I was a really good kid. I was sweet, friendly, responsible, and loving. And of course you were. I was an excellent student and athlete. I was senior class president, for God's sakes. I did my job very well. I was and am still the classic scapegoat for my mother and my younger brother, who is, of course, the golden child. I would argue that the lasting impact of my mother's abuse has impacted him far more worse than it's impacted me. But that's a whole different level of my story, and there is so much more I could tell you, as you know. The only saving grace was my father, who passed away in 2013. He was truly the only person who loved me unconditionally. All I had to do for him was breathe, and I was good enough. He was my favorite person on earth and was the healer of my mother wounds. My mother was masterful at hiding her treatment of us from him, as he traveled a lot for work. Our trauma was private, between us and her. He never witnessed any of it and would even suffer her guilt trips and temper tantrums if he ever stuck up for us or questioned her in any way. Since he died 10 years ago, all of this has bubbled up, and I have had to face the reality of my childhood and the way she wounded me. So, where does it hurt? It hurts in my relationships. I got married at 23 from my mother, divorced at 34 with 2 amazing sons, now 14 and 16. I immediately entered a new relationship, and it was a complete manifestation of my wounds. Shape shifting to be the woman that didn't need anything or have any expectations so he would love me and I could be the best. So it hurts when I seek love from others, specifically men. I have instinctively used the hypervigilance I learned to manage my mom's emotional status to figure out how to turn myself into the version of Brenda that men want, regardless if it crosses my own boundaries. What boundaries, after all? I learned that the person I seek love from will set my boundaries for me. I self-sacrifice, I self-abandon, and I find myself drawn to men who exhibit traits of my mother. I'm working on this in therapy, and the fact that I can even identify any of this is huge progress for me. But I worry that she broke my people picker. I worry that I am the only person I'm to feel safe with now. I worry that I will only seek men who light up my trauma mind because that is what I equate with love. That's where it hurts. I've spent my whole life wanting to love someone and be chosen. And I fear that her abuse made me someone who confuses love with manipulation. Ooh, okay, Brenda, I feel this. Man, you make so much sense to me. All of this makes so much sense to me. And it sounds like you and your therapist have done some really, really good work together. And it sounds like you've learned a lot. And you already have a lot of the puzzle pieces out on the table, but you're having a hard time putting them all back into place. I do have some insight as to why that might be, but first let me help all of you with a little bit of a big picture understanding of what's at play here. Now, Brenda, I know you know some of this already from the exchanges we've had about this episode, but I want to bring the other listeners up to speed, and I think it's going to help all of you understand this a little bit more. To really understand this, we first have to zoom the lens out for some big picture understanding. And again, that fourth episode is going to be a really good one for all of you, but here's what I want to remind you of today. First, here's what we know about basic child development. Kids learn by observing their primary caregivers. When you are a young child and your experience of being in a relationship is feeling less than or not good enough, you quickly internalize that messaging, not because you're born weak or because you're born with low self-esteem, but because your brain is developing and growing so rapidly that it just soaks everything in. It soaks the good, it soaks the bad, the intentional or the unintentional. So your brain took in a lot about relationships in those early primitive years. And then in that time, you also learn about your role in relationships. You learn what gets attention, you learn what gets rewarded, what gets ignored, and then you also happen to learn what elicits abuse. You then subconsciously repeat those behaviors in order to get the desirable responses. And as you're experiencing now, Brenda, you get hardwired to those patterns until you decide that they don't work for you anymore and you want to stop. Your mom offered you very little emotional support. Your dad was wholeheartedly with you, but he also wasn't there, and he wasn't privy to your truth. Perhaps you even witnessed your mom lashing out at him enough to decide for yourself that you didn't want to burden him with it. Maybe you just let him be your escape and wanted the limited time you had with him to always be good, so you opted not to burden him, further cementing in your own little girl Brenda's brain and experience that her pain doesn't matter, that it's a burden and that it's an inconvenience. In defining your identity, your role, and your values for you, your mom didn't allow you to develop your own sense of self, to know yourself or who you are. Until your realizations in therapy, you participated in all of these relationships without a sense of self. And I use this example with clients and they give me the crazy look too, but I'm going to go with it anyway. Now, I don't know if you know anything about tofu, but on its own, tofu doesn't really taste like much, and it doesn't have a lot of structure to it on its own. Again, bear with me. It has to be molded into shape. And then what it does is it takes in and absorbs whatever flavors you end up using to cook with it, and it takes on the shape of however you mold it to be. Brenda, you've probably never been told that you're just like tofu. So you're welcome for that one, everyone. But you've been molded into shape and you've been put into these situations to take on the flavors and preferences of others. That is how, and at least in part, how you got here. Without an identity of your own, your self esteem, your autonomy, your sense of self ended up being defined by your mom or other close relationships. But if they weren't with you, if they walked away, if they went on to other things, you were left on your own, not really knowing who you are, what you like, what you care about, or what you're looking for in a relationship, or even how you expect to be treated inside of a relationship. Instead of tofu, maybe you'll prefer that I compare you to Julia Roberts. Who doesn't like being compared to Julia Roberts? So, my friend Brenda, you're like Julia Roberts in Runaway Bride. You don't even know how you like your eggs. So, with so and so, you liked them fried. For so and so, you liked them scrambled. You just went along with whatever was easier without ever knowing what your own preference was or that you could even have a preference. So, of course, Brenda, of course, that makes you so vulnerable to having those self esteem issues and difficulty setting boundaries. You're already so used to existing on just little crumbs, on endlessly scanning others and their needs for approval, that you haven't yet learned that it's okay to first learn and then absorb your own values. And here's the thing about that scanning tool, it is a beast to overcome too, because by always scanning for the comfort of others and using that as the metric scale, you never actually learn for yourself what makes you uncomfortable when a value has been crossed or when something happens that doesn't feel quite right. Your threshold for pain has become so ungodly high that you've been in agony before you start to think that you might perhaps deserve some attention or care. Remember here what happened to you, my friend. Crazy, dysfunctional relationship patterns were normalized for you. It was normal for your dad to not know what was going on with his own kids. It was normal for your dad to be beaten down into acquiescence by your mom. You didn't just see your mom's abusive tendencies here. I know. You know what? Here we go. I'm going to slow this down. Whew. Okay, Brenda, I want you to take a deep breath. I want you to just sit with me for a second because I know you loved him a whole hell of a lot. And I really hate poking holes into your memory of him. But your dad modeled for you that you take that kind of treatment, that you stay, that being berated, controlled, and lied to isn't a reason to leave, to stand up for yourself, or to demand a change. I know that's a hard one to sit with. So just sit with me and trust me on this, okay? Because we want to continue this conversation. It's really important. I wouldn't point it out otherwise. Also, too, I don't know for how many of your years of your upbringing it was that your dad traveled for work, but however long it was, your core memory of love was that it was finite, brief, and it regularly went away. Love wasn't something that always got to be yours to hold on to and to keep. Love, Brenda, always had to go. So it makes so much sense to me that little girl Brenda and her brain got used to love being a series of intense reunions and then departures. You haven't had healthy, steady love modeled for you. So, knowing all of this, of course, my friend, of course, relationships have become hard for you. Of course, unavailable partners start to feel familiar to you. And of course, you get used to the idea of love being conditional while also waiting with bated breath to be abandoned. And then we have the tragic loss of your stillborn son and how your mom made an indescribably awful, tragic, and traumatic day about her. Whew. Okay, Brenda, we're breathing together. I mentioned a second ago about your pain tolerance. Even in agony, when life has handed you with the absolute worst, your pain and your experience didn't get to be your own. How incredibly god awful, how selfish, and how insidious in the ways all of that aches and hurts. And gosh, Brenda, I am so sorry that this is a part of your story and a thread that will always be attached to the loss and grief of your son. It is so unfortunate. So, of course, when gut wrenching heartbreak can't even be yours, how do you ever learn to take up space or believe that you matter? Once you survive all of that, I don't blame you for not wanting to survive anything more. I would be tempted to close up shop too. You make a lot of sense to me because by now you're probably mostly good with you, right? You know yourself more. I would argue that you haven't come to know all of your strengths, but I can hear in this email that you at least know some of them. You know what you need to work on and where things can get slippery. So why would you go and disrupt any of that? Also, though, my friend, this is a little bit of your trauma brain talking. Trauma brain is telling you that it's safer by yourself, that you can only trust yourself, and that change is scary. Now, wise mind knows that you haven't just come this far to only come this far. You aren't doing the trauma work to be able to just exist, to be able to merely survive. You're doing it to live and to thrive. And Brenda, I'm going to show you how we do it. Okay. So here goes. And Brenda and everyone, this is for you to find your person, your next best friend, or your next companion on the path. You can use this for friends, lovers, acquaintances. And also, my friends, this is where you should go and get a piece of pen and paper. You heard me say that I'm not one for journaling. And on this exercise, I have to tell you, I really do really require pen and paper. And Clark, she's with me on this one too. She recently mandated me to put something to pen and paper too. So here's what we're doing. We are getting clear on what it is you're looking for: a life partner, a best friend, someone you can date, a good friend, an activity partner. You get the picture. There's all kinds of relationships, all kinds of levels of intimacy and how close you want someone to be to you. And you can use this exercise for whatever kind of relationship you are looking to add to your life. And I want you to get crystal clear on owning and naming what it is you say you want. So, Brenda, you might be saying, I am looking for a life partner who is ready to meet his person. He knows he can do life alone, but he just doesn't want to. He's emotionally available and actively seeking a relationship. He doesn't just want to date passively and see how it goes. He wants to participate in building something, has time to commit to it. Hint, hint, hint. Make sure on that one, my friends. And it's clear that he wants to build something with me. I hear it in his words, I see it in his actions, and I feel it in his presence. You might not talk like me. That might not sound like something you would say. So, all of you, say it like you, but say it. Name it. Name the kind of relationship you are seeking so clearly that you are going to recognize it when it's there. Now, this part of it, I wouldn't make that more than 4 to 5 sentences. You want to be brief and clear with yourselves so that you can know it, and then you're going to work on owning it. Then I want you to get clear on something with yourselves. How do you want to feel in this relationship? You want to know it by looking at it, but you also want to know what you want it to feel like within you. This relationship that is so important to you, how do you want to feel inside of it? Then I want you to make your list of non negotiables. These are the characteristics you absolutely need this person to have. Not a wish list, not a want list, the deal breakers. Name them as specifically as you can so you know them when you see them. A lot of women at this point, now they'll tell me they don't know, that they don't want to be elitist, that they don't want to be judgmental, and they don't want to leave anyone out. And I get it, because after all of you know what it's like to be left out. But here's the thing. We need to get unapologetic about our lives and what we want and what we expect for them. So you, my friends, are going to make that list. Now, once you've looked at it and really feel like you've gotten it down, that's when you have my permission to go ahead and make it digital. Make it your screensaver on your phone. Put it on your nightstand. Put it in your bathroom mirror. Have that list near you or on your person at all times. Then, my friends, eyes up. Be open to finding it. Welcome that person in. Picture yourselves on your welcome mat. The door is behind you and it's closed. They don't get in and you don't open it until you invite them in. You, my friends, are not hosting an open house. It is invitation only. But as you meet people, you're starting to check your list fastidiously, more fastidiously than Santa. So when someone is interested in you, or when you are interested in someone, you are checking that list and you are looking to see what that person is offering you that at first glance indicates that they might fit the list. You are looking and asking yourself why this person earns your first yes. Obviously, no one is sharing their life story with you right away, but I want you to start getting used to the idea of deciding who earns a yes and then naming for yourselves why. What about them makes you want to proceed? So often, all of you are used to being in the passenger seat of this process and of this conversation. You are used to looking at the people before you who have chosen you first, who have expressed interest in you first, and then deciding from there. And that, my friends, is not how we're doing it anymore. I am fine with them asking you out for a date, swiping first, asking you for coffee or asking for your number or whatever. But I want you to start stopping and thinking before answering. Why does this person earn a yes? You are not answering because they chose you. You are answering because you chose them. You, my friends, are in control of this decision. What about them, their approach, how they speak, how they represent themselves? What about them makes you say yes? Name it, and then go ahead and say yes. Then, after that first yes, you have that text exchange, you go on the date, you meet up. You want to check that list. Has that person showed you in word and in action the potential to be that person? What about them says so? What did you see, feel, or hear that gave you that reassurance? You continue the process as long as that person is earning a yes. But as time is passing, you're checking in with yourselves that that person is consistent with themselves, that they are showing you more and more with each passing point of contact that they are the person on that list, meeting all of your characteristics. Meanwhile, you're sharing pieces of yourselves and you're seeing what they do. Are they sharing pieces of themselves in kind? Are they listening? Are they interested? Are they interesting? Is how they are responding to you earning a yes? Is how you feel when you're with them heading in the direction that you have already named for yourself that you wanted to feel inside this relationship? Do they show you that potential? So if you have a list of 5 things, but they only meet 4 of them, my friends, it is a no. They can be good people. They just aren't your good people. You are giving yourselves permission to be discerning. You're demanding it of yourselves. You are risking being wrong about someone rather than taking a chance on someone. Because here's the thing, Brenda, and everyone listening, your picker has never been broken. You just didn't give yourselves permission to use it. You've used your mothers, you've used your friends, you've worried about being judgmental, you worried that he was a nice guy, you worried. You worried that the right guy, your guy, didn't exist, that he might not choose you, or there was some other story you created. So then, when someone was not your guy, but he was in front of you, you said yes anyway. When you talk about abandoning yourself, that's what you meant. And I know you know this. So, those are the concrete steps. No one gets past the welcome mat until they earn the right to be there. I started with the concrete, not to oversimplify it or to talk down in any way to your pain, but to show you what's possible when you give yourselves permission to let go of the behaviors and tendencies that no longer serve you. I want to bring you back to the words you first shared with me in your letter. I self sacrifice, I self abandon, and I find myself drawn to men who exhibit traits of my mother. I'm working on this in therapy, and the fact that I can even identify any of this is huge progress for me. But I worry that she broke my people picker, I worry that I am the only person I am safe with now. I worry that I will only see men who light up my trauma mind because that is what I equate with love. That's where it hurts. I've spent my whole life wanting to love someone and be chosen, and I fear that her abuse made me someone who confuses love with manipulation. Brenda, these were some really brave words that you wrote to me and you shared with me and are now sharing with the rest of the world. And I see the struggle and I hear your pain and I also hear the shame and hopelessness. And we need to move you out and away from those feelings. You listed behaviors. You self abandon. You self sacrifice. Brenda, your struggle is with choosing you every day. So it makes total sense to me that you don't believe a guy ever would. So I want to be clear here. I am not selling you that crap about having to love yourself before anyone else can love you. I just don't believe that. I believe that people in healing can consciously choose people in healing and build intentional relationships. However, I also believe that before we can really believe that someone's going to choose us every day, we have to have proof positive that someone does. And in a perfect world, that's our parents. But very few people were parented so perfectly, so a lot of us are among the walking wounded. So you are going to do all of the steps I just outlined. You're going to write the list. You're going to be open. You're going to put yourself in a position to be doing the choosing, to be in the driver's seat. And then in the background of all of this, you're going to be doing some more things. In moments of decision and choice, you are going to start asking yourself, what is the choice that I need to make so that I don't abandon myself? Before you give, before you say yes, before you acquiesce, I want you to start doing a gut check. Why has this situation, person, etc., earned this from me? Why am I agreeing to this? Will I feel good about this later tonight or tomorrow? You are going to check in and get in the habit of making sure you don't self sacrifice without intentionally doing so. Because here's the thing, we are all going to self sacrifice and self abandon at times. We can't do it all the time, and we certainly can't feel like we have this habit of consistently self abandoning. But here's the thing, my husband, I can call him out on my show after all, right? He insists on vegetables with every goddamn meal. It is a rare meal where we don't have a vegetable, and I am the one in charge of cooking. And I really, honestly, I promise you guys, I know you're going to find this so hard to believe, right? I can live without vegetables with some dishes. I don't think that chicken and rice always has to have a vegetable. I don't think every pasta dish I make has to have a salad to go along with it. And every once in a while, I can get a pass on that. But most of the meals I serve in this house have vegetables. He also tends to get heartburn if we eat too late, so we end up going out to eat so much earlier than I really want to. I would prefer to be out later when the restaurants are fuller, but I don't need to be up with him all night feeling ill for that particular privilege. So, most of those days, I can go along with either of these things. I can suck it up and I can add a vegetable to the chicken and rice. But when I don't want to, I don't. And all I do is say, I know you would probably prefer a vegetable with this. I opted out tonight. Stay tuned for tomorrow. So I still acknowledge his need, and I acknowledge for him that I know it's something he cares about, but I am choosing me. And the eating dinner early thing, gotta be honest with you guys, that is a harder one for me to swallow sometimes. So sometimes I do ask to go out to eat later and ask if he wouldn't mind maybe choosing something that wouldn't give him heartburn. But that often means that he's going to end up choosing something he doesn't really want. And he'll do that for me so that I can feel like what I call a grown up on any given Saturday night. So it's checking in with ourselves. What is an easy give? What hurts? How do I manage this so I am not always bending and turning myself into a pretzel? But also, how can I be okay with knowing that some gives are going to be easy for me and it doesn't mean I'm giving myself away? That's the conversation I want all of you to start having with yourself as you meet with friends, as you're hanging out with your kids, as you're navigating things at work, as you're moving through your life. You build habits around not abandoning yourself in daily choices and in daily check ins. And sometimes doing these things is just habit, and you're not going to notice in the moment that you're doing it. So at the end of the day, I want you checking in with yourselves and I want you taking note. Did I give myself away today? Did I self abandon? Did I self sacrifice? Did I say yes when I should have said no, or vice versa? Do that check in with yourselves. Get in the habit of doing it at the end of every day. If you made a decision that can be undone, go ahead and undo it. Then look at your day, make note of the times you didn't abandon yourself. The order on this, my friends, is specific. We always, always, always end up starting with strengths and we end with weaknesses, and then we end up forgetting about our strengths because we feel like shit about our weaknesses. So we're going to get you out of that habit and we're going to get you ending with strength. What are the ways I stayed true to myself today? What are the ways I didn't abandon myself? Where was I my own best friend? You might have done any number of these things shaking and scared, but you did them. And aside from the nerves that come with making that decision, how did you feel after? What does it feel like to choose you, to know what you want, and to feel it? I want you to make note of that feeling, the feeling of what it feels like to choose you. Make it a repeatable occurrence. It will start to become your preference. You will know it when you see it because you chose yourself first. Then, when someone else makes you feel that feeling, it will feel familiar. You will recognize it, you will know it, and you, my friends, will want to feel more of it. When someone makes you feel that way, you will move toward that person because they have already earned all of the other yeses. There, your head is in the game. It's doing the checks and balances with your heart. And that, my friends, is wise mind. Wise mind then sees the person earning yeses, sees the person choosing you, sees the person making you feel the way you want to feel, and it all starts lining up. And that, sister, is the process. A deliberate process of choosing you first. So you're showing people how you expect to be treated, and then everyone else can start to see themselves out. So pragmatic basics with some good old fashioned trauma work. That is how we're going to increase your confidence with your picker. That is how we do it. Okay, I know I've gone on and on here, and I hope I haven't gotten us too far into the weeds with this conversation, but I want to be clear about something, Brenda, and it is really, really super important to me that you hear me on this. If you've been furiously taking notes and writing all the things down, you have my permission now to go ahead and put the pen and paper down for a second. And if you're free to do so, if you're, not driving or anything, I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to be really still with yourself so you can really hear me. And obviously, this goes for all of you too. Anybody who's not like out and about or otherwise engaged, you might need to come back to this part. But I really want all of you to take this in. You are capable of loving, Brenda. You know you love your kids. You know you love your friends. You are capable of being in a committed adult relationship and of showing up as your whole self. You are capable of being loved and of receiving love. You are worthy of love. You're deserving of love. You know how to be alone, and it's okay that you don't want to be. You don't have to be. Wanting love, wanting to be chosen is not needy. It's you loving yourself first. It's wise mind telling you that you are ready, that you are already enough. This is possible for you. It's going to take work and it's going to take intention. And you're going to have to keep showing up for yourself and the life you say you want. But it, my friend, is possible. You're going to have to take chances. You're likely, unfortunately, going to get hurt again because, after all, there really is no guarantee that your next first date is going to be your last first date. But in this promise to be intentional, to choose people who keep earning yeses, and above all, to keep choosing you, I know you've got this. So, eyes up. Let the universe know you're ready. Be looking only for what you have identified for yourself that you want. Be unwilling to see anyone else. Now is not the time for compromise. You've got this. You have yourself. And you are in this with a community of women around the world who are in this with you. They're rooting for you. And of course, I am in it with you and rooting for you too. Bye for now. I'm so grateful that you're here. You're right where you're supposed to be. At its heart, I'm hoping to use this show to build a community of women working together to heal from childhoods marked by maternal narcissism and emotional neglect. My goal for Mother Mayhem is that this show becomes an advice and mentoring driven show where you share your questions, struggles, and stories, and I offer you direction for healing and recovery. That can't happen without your contributions. I invite you to send a recorded voice memo or write in an email with your questions and things you're struggling with. You can always find me over at heather@daughtersnpd.com. To connect further, I invite you to find me over at Instagram and occasionally on TikTok at DaughtersNPD. If you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, I'm going to ask that you share the show with her. You can help me get the word out with your reviews and social shares of the show, and I hope you'll consider doing so. Special thanks to Heather Clark for editing this show. She's in my head and knows what I meant to say when the words come out backwards. Thanks for your time today. I'm always in it with you. Bye for now.